Hi, my name's Andrew, and today on The Wooden Hobbyist we're going to be building this jewelry box, or keepsake box, memory box. It's a pretty box. My plans going into this build were no plans at all. That means I made a lot of mistakes, and I had to fix a lot of those mistakes. So stick around to the end to see what mistakes I made so you can learn from my idiocy. Now I have this stack of wood here. I cut it down to rough size on the miter saw. Move to the joiner. I need to get a flat face on all sides since this is all rough cut. Once I get the flat face on everything, I move over to squaring up my fence and getting the sides done. After I get a good 90-degree angle on everything, I move over to my Oliver machinery planer. That Helix blade leaves a beautiful finish. Then I move over to cutting everything down on the table saw. This won't be my final width, but I like a nice surface 4 sides piece of wood to work with before I move on to anything else. Now I move on to resawing. For the walnut, I need basically 5/8 of an inch because I plane it down to just a little over 1/2 of an inch. Now for the maple, I get everything down to just a little over 1/4 of an inch because I'm going to plane everything down afterwards. Everything else comes down to 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch upcut bit for most of the grooves dados in this build. I routed a 1/4 inch groove into a scrap piece of plywood so I can check the thickness as I was planing to make sure I got it down to extremely tight so when I sand down it'll be a nice perfect fit. After we have everything milled down to final thickness, I move on to the box itself. I cut everything down to final size on the miter saw. As I'm doing this with no measurements or no plans, I'm just setting a stop block on my miter saw, cutting 2 pieces for the front and the back, and cutting 2 pieces for the sides. So this part's important. I choose the best looking piece of walnut for my box front. I want to have a drawer in the front of my box, so I go to my bandsaw. This piece will be the drawer front. This piece will be the drawer box. Here I'm routing a groove to all the top edges and the bottom edges. This will be a place for the lid and the first internal bottom to sit. Having a drawer, you need to have 2 internal bottoms. After that, I route a second groove on 3 of the faces and the drawer front to be the internal second bottom. I take my Makita compact router and edge guide and route some stop dados for the inserts I plan on putting on the inside portion of the box. I take this time while the box is separated to fill any inconsistencies with Starbond glue. Chisel it down, sand it, and then chisel the stop dados to be nice and square. So one of my first mistakes here, I decided to go with a rabbiting bit. The rabbiting bit for the edges of the box is not an issue. What it was too small for the thickness. Stick around to see how I decide to fix it. After I have all the box pieces ready to go for assembly, I start working on the cherry stretchers. If you remember, we did everything besides the box down to 1/4 of an inch thick. So these stretchers are going to fit right inside of the stop dados I decided to put on the inside of the box for section pieces. I cut them to size on the miter saw and move over to my table saw and install a flat top grind blade. And then I decided to do half flap bridle thing. I decided to do joints that look like this. I keep them really tight, as per usual, so I could sand them down to get a nice snug fit at the end. I set everything aside and start working on the lid and bottom and top floor panels. Turned out the width of my box was too big because I didn't decide to do any measurements. It's always fun to just knock out another glue up. After I got to the glue up and cutting everything down to final dimensions, these are the pieces that I had ready for assembly. Move on to mistake number 2. You see here I did a stop dado, but I lost control of my router. So the first thing to do to fix this, chisel it out square, cut a rough piece of square stock out of a 1/4 inch scrap I had. I glued it into place, set a clamp on it, and let it dry. After it was dry, I paired it with a chisel and sanded it flush. Once I set everything aside there, decided to move back onto the lid as it was going to be the most important part of the assembly because that's what everyone looks at in a box. At least that's what I look at in a box. I found out my lid was actually too thin. I needed to do something, so I had to stretch the wood. My solution for mistake number 3 involving this lid was to turn it into a cutting board style kind of piece of panel. I got a scrap piece of katalox, decided to rip it down into small pieces and thicker pieces. I used this piece of scrap oak with sandpaper to keep my hand away from the blade and allow the blade to cut through because I don't have any special push sticks. Then I cut the cherry down. After assembly, I decided to put it all together and kind of come up with this design. Glue it up just like a cutting board, wipe all the glue off the top, forget that you have glue on the bottom, set it aside, and boom, it looks pretty. I was afraid of snipe on my planer once I was finished with glue up. So I decided to rip down 2 small pieces of walnut from a cutoff, glue them to the sides, so I could have extension pieces on the front and back to eliminate any of that possible snipe. Once it was done glued up, I ran it through my Oliver planer again. Like I said, that Helix cutter head does fantastic. I cut off all the edge waste and got the final width down to dimension by sneaking up on the cut to make sure everything fit right. I grabbed my Starrett combo square, marked 1/4 of an inch, and decided to take that rabbiting bit again and cut all the edges down all the way up to where it was a 1/4 inch from the top. This 1/4 inch groove on the side will allow that lid to fit with a reveal all the way around the edge. After that, I grabbed the largest chamfer bit I had, added an edge profile all the way around the top. I grabbed my sanding block and decided to sand away any pieces I couldn't touch after I did my glue up. Then I moved on to the bottom panels. This is when I realized I didn't mill up enough lumber to actually have a second bottom panel. So cue the super fast milling up of a 1/4 inch stock. So after milling up that final piece for my bottom panel, I decided to sand all the internal pieces. This is technically where I made my 4th mistake. My 4th mistake isn't what I did, it's what I didn't do. Stick around and you'll see what that issue was. Before glue up, I decided to add a 1/4 inch round over to the insides of all of the top panels. Glue up was slightly stressful because I couldn't fit everything in together. I couldn't reach my hands in to make sure those stretchers set. But I eventually got it, and it started to look pretty dang cool. After that was done gluing up, I moved my way back to that drawer front that we cut off on the bandsaw. I needed to match the rabbet depth to the front of the drawer front so everything laid flush when it was done. I decided to use blue painter's tape to attach the lid temporarily to the box while I worked on the edges and resaw. I grabbed my Freud 3/4 inch roundover bit, decided to add a roundover to all the edges of the box. This smoothed out all the rabbiting oversized pieces I had on the edges after glue up. My most stressful and favorite part at the same time is resawing the lid from the top, so you can see what all your hard work is starting to come to. After resawing, I needed to get rid of all the saw marks on the lid and the box. I took this scrap piece of polyethylene plywood. I used double-sided tape and 120 grit sandpaper to start smoothing away. This part's really important. You want to put your hands on both sides of the lid, count out a number of repetitions in a circular pattern, flip the lid 180 degrees, and do the same amount of repetitions. This will eliminate any uneven sanding due to uneven pressure from your hands. Then do the same thing to the box. After I had that all sanded smooth and even, I decided to move on towards setting up the insert trays and the drawer. After ripping them down to correct width, I decided to cut them down to final size with the incremental gauge. I used my Starrett combo square again to set up my fence exactly 1/4 inch away from the tip of the bit and set the bit exactly 1/4 inch away from the top of the table. This gives me an exact 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch rabbet. I used a scrap piece of wood to make sure the insert sides stay square to the fence and that there's no tear out on the back of them. This is probably one of the most satisfying things. Although I didn't have tear out, I did have all these little fuzzies and they're really fun to clean up with a chisel. After that was cleaned up, your pieces should look like this when they come together. Nice and tight. After I cut the bottom piece from 1/4 inch walnut stock, I did a dry fit of the assembly and then moved on to glue up once I was comfortable with the results. glue up of the insert trays, I moved on to the drawer for the drawer front. This will be the same type of joinery done as I did with my insert trays, so I'm not going to push you through watching that all over again. Just know it's a little bit bigger and everything's done the same. I didn't even change the fence on my router table. Now whatever mistake number this is, I forgot again to mill up another 1/4 inch panel for the actual drawer bottom. So I was able to find a 1/4 inch thick piece of plywood, cut it down to size to be the drawer bottom. I plan on flocking this later anyway, so no one's gonna even know. This is the first time I've ever installed hinges like this. Now when using these flat style of hinges, they're actually not flat when they close all the way. You need to recess them exactly half the width of the barrel on the back. Lay the lid parallel to the box, clamp it in place, use blue tape, and mark out the hinges with a marking knife. I grabbed my compact router, put a big piece of plywood on it to keep it from tipping, and hogged out the rest of the waste. After hogging out most of the waste, I pared it back with a chisel and kept testing for fit. Now one part I missed right here. Get yourself a set, or even just one, of a self-centering hinge bit. This thing works wonders. There's no more marking. There's nothing like that that you have to deal with. You just put it in the hinge, perfectly center as you see here. Now this is also another first for me. I wanted this latch to be recessed. I hogged out most of the waste with my compact Makita router after I found out where I wanted the latch to sit. Then I took a chisel, pared everything back accordingly, and kept testing for fit until it was nice and snug. Now after that was done and I made sure the latch was fitting perfectly, I laid the box on its back, I put the drawer inside of the drawer hole, and then I took the drawer front, glued it with CA glue and regular glue. The CA glue, as you probably know, acts as a clamp, so I don't have to sit and wait for all that crap to dry. Placing the drawer in like this allows me to center up the drawer front and keep it as nice and pretty as possible. On to the final bits here, so I added roundovers to all pieces I thought need roundovers like these trays. Just anything that's going to be touched was going to be rounded over. Now this leads to my biggest mistake. This wipe-on, quote-unquote, Waco polyurethane wiped on like maple syrup over sandpaper. It was not easy, it came out crap, and I had to do a lot of things to try to fix it. Now another mistake I made going back to before glue up when I sanded all the pieces together was I actually didn't finish the insides first. You can see how this is a problem whenever I open the lid and you see all these tiny little cracks and crevices I have to get into with a wipe-on finish. I flocked the inside of the drawer and the insert trays. Flocking is really easy to apply. All you do is add the adhesive glue with a brush and you flock this powder. Flock. It's really flocking fun. Flocking material leaves a really smooth, kind of suede finish on the inside to give a real sick contrast to the actual wood itself. Whenever I'm done with the flocking material, before it's completely dry, I remove all the tape, dip a rag in some mineral spirits, and wipe off anything that's seeped under the tape, so that way I can have nice clean lines all the way around the edge. I decided to use some paste wax to give it a nicer feel and to kind of buff out anything that may have looked inconsistent around the edges, which still was not perfect. I got these little brass knob pulls from Rockler to put in the center of the insert trays. I grabbed some other brass drawer pulls off of Amazon for a cheap price, and they actually turned out pretty cool. The insert trays slide nice, they fit real nice. You actually don't have to take them out at all. It's designed to be able to just slide them left and right so you can access everything underneath. The flocking turned out great. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this fly by the seat of my pants build. Now with all the mistakes made, I'd still say it turned out pretty cool. If you like what you saw, you want to learn more, or you just want to make fun of me making more mistakes, make sure you like and subscribe, leave a comment if you have any questions, and I queued up some other videos right here that you might like from my channel.